We'll give a second for everyone to come into the webcast. And yeah, let's get started. So hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Quedno. I am the program director at Strong Towns, and I'm glad to welcome you to this Q&A follow-up from our Tuesday webcast called Revitalizing Your Town from the Bottom Up. As a reminder, the panelists that are joining us today include Talicia Richardson, who's the executive director of 646 Downtown, which is located in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Then we have Salvador Galdamez, who is the founder of York XL in York, Pennsylvania. And we have Martin Callahan, who is a city council member in Batavia, Illinois. So we've collected questions that were submitted by folks who attended the Tuesday webcast over the last few days, collected those on the Strong Towns community site, and we'll be asking those of our panelists in just a second. But I also want to say that if you're attending right now and you have a question that comes up during the webcast, feel free to submit it in the Q&A as we go, and we'll try to get to those. So to start off, we had some specific questions for individual panelists, and I want to begin with Talicia. Someone wrote, "Your comments on meeting business owners where they are speaks to my situation so much. What are some resources that might help us in interviews and conversations with business owners?" Or maybe just general suggestions on doing those conversations about how they're handling the pandemic and what some strategies are for working with them.
So great question. And I apologize with any echo if you guys are hearing that, any feedback. The first thing with resources, any leadership book, any team building book, those types of resources will be very, very helpful. However, nothing can replace face-to-face contact and building a rapport with someone. So you must know that business owner, who they are as an individual, what their likes and dislikes are. Do your research, and that means going out, looking at their website for their business, but also getting a feel of their social presence in your community. Are they volunteers? What do they do during their personal time? Anything that you'll be able to use to build a bridge or a rapport, a connection with that individual is very, very important. Don't go in for the jugular, telling them what they need to do with their business. Listen intently to everything they're saying. Are they overwhelmed? Are they stressed? Or do they just simply don't know where to go for the resources? And that's your in. Once you realize those things, know what drives them and building that rapport with them. And if their issue, for example, is inventory, they don't know how to do their inventory. What resources can you find based on that? If you're in a Main Street community, a lot of Main Streets, and especially here in the state of Arkansas, they go out into our communities across the state and zap those property owners, those business owners with whatever resources they need. So I don't necessarily have to be the expert. I have the opportunity to pull the experts in and say, hey, your tax dollars are being used for Main Street, Arkansas. And I want to bring some consultants up here to assist you. And they're awesome. This is their experience, and there's no out-of-pocket expenses on your end. That makes people just go, wow, because number one, I don't have to pay for it. Number two, I have someone that I have a rapport with that is going to schedule that and make sure that that consulting relationship gives me what I need. So you come off as being that person that just has all of these resources, and you're just simply coordinating and finding and meeting people where they are. And in closing, I would say, be patient with the process, because you may be the first person that has walked in that door and said, how can I help you? What do I need to do to make you successful? I'm not getting anything in return. So you have to build trust and follow their lead. It may take 6 months for them to trust you, but you want them to trust you in 6 days. So that means you have to be persistent, yet patient. And that's what I think has been very successful for us, because there are people that wouldn't call me back. And then I'll go in and say, I've been meaning to follow up with you. And then the ice was broken. But again, it's persistence, yet patience.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. Next question I want to ask is for Martin. We had a couple people who inquired about the small scale shops, pop-up shops that you've worked on in Batavia. Someone says, I'm interested to learn more about how to develop these. I would like to see ideas about how they start and the steps that you've taken to make them come alive. And there was also someone who asked about kind of connecting those pop-up shops to a farmer's market effort. So Martin, can you tell us about how that all came to be and how it's been working?
Sure, absolutely. And ours started clearly because we saw it in the article that was written back in 2018 and resurfaced 2019. That was the impetus for it. And you get into a project, well, what are the goals? Our goals initially were kind of what everybody thinks, retail density, foot traffic, revenue generation, better use of spaces, and as a big business incubator. But as kind of Chuck had put in one of his April articles, the quote that stuck with me is, humans don't live by theory, but by emotion, which is why this project is succeeding. It's introducing the emotion, the visuals of it. Your article had the picture of Muskegon's shops. So when you see that, you have to start with the visualization of, do I see that happening in our community? Forget about all the nuts and bolts and the details of it. Can I see it? Can I feel it? Can I smell it? Can I just imagine myself walking around there, hearing people talking? If the answer to that is yes, then it's just a matter of putting everything together. And that goes to the question of, how do you achieve the success for it? It's achieved visually and through the emotion, adding that human element into the project. It creates something that supports supported by the design, the inclusion of the ideas, the products, the services that are being sold. The element that these businesses are started by local neighbors. People want to then get involved with that business, and they want to see it succeed because their success means the community's success. It's not achieved for our project, it was not going to be achieved by just going to a local big box store, buying some sheds and plopping them down on a vacant lot. It's more than that. While technically that's what you're doing, you're creating, you're constructing, you're putting it in a location, but that doesn't cure what you're trying to create, which is community. And so how do you achieve those things? In ours, we had the initial concept was based on visuals. Do we see this pop-up shop? But then you get into the idea of who funds it, how much. We were lucky in that when I first saw this, we had an economic development grant in the amount of $300,000 from the federal government that had been sitting in a fund for 10 years. So we took 150 of that and said, we're going to allocate $150,000 to this project. How do you build them? And with materials. That's going to supply the materials. We had the funding, we had the location, because it was a city parking lot that was fairly underutilized. And we also had electric. Our city owns its own electricity. So we were able to supply that as an in-kind. But then the city should step out of it, and just like Talicia said, is you've got to trust the resources that you have in your community and rely upon them to take it. We have a very strong Chamber of Commerce. We have a very strong Main Street organization. So we asked Main Street to partner with us and oversee the project development and the construction of it. And they have fantastic people over there. We have a great executive director, Sherry Wilcox, and the two people that were in charge of the construction and the project management, Jamie Sam and Bob Hansen. Those are people that you just want on your side because they don't stop. You need people in the community that are going to put their whole heart and soul into it. And then you've got to find you've got to know where your other resources are. We have a building and trades program over at the high school. And that was an idea that we saw that these shops are there. How do you get them created? Well, you think of alternative means to include the community. And we had the building and trades build two of these themselves so they can learn the practical experience. Now, they weren't able to build them entirely because COVID forced us to change some of the planning, but the sentiment was there. You look for, now these students are going to drive by and they're going to be, I built that, I created that, I helped build that, and their families are going to feel that way too. We also had, as a result of that, when it starts creating community, then you have the businesses that are nearby that see that the value in this. They know that they want to support it. And that's kind of the intangibles that you want. They know they're going to benefit from additional street walk, but they also have a selflessness that they want to see others succeed. And those are the things that aren't quantifiable in the technical side of it. And it was on purpose, just the same way that we had they have up in Muskegon. We have a strong farmers market right down the street. So we paired it with that to make sure that some of that overflowed. We had the selection of some of the businesses were farmers market entities because we want to see them take it from once a week farmers market to an incubator business to grow their place and take over a storefront. So all of those things pieced together into what has been so far a very successful means of going about it. And if anybody does want more on the nuts and bolts of it, they can go to downtownbatavia.com and learn all the other boring policy factors of lease agreements and selection process.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Especially appreciate the way that you highlighted the fact that this is not just buy some materials and plop them down and then it's going to happen. Takes these partnerships and thinking about what sort of feeling you want to create and the way that the whole community is involved. So I love that.
And absolutely on that, it's been years of building up to it to this point. You can't just automatically say, well, this is a project that we're going to do without hiccups. You have to know who to go to, how to have people work collectively as a team on many projects before so that each project then goes smoother. We're at a good cadence right now with our community. And I think that's why it maybe seems a little more effortless, which is a good thing.
Yeah, got it. So this next specific question was for Sal. You mentioned really briefly on Tuesday that you had done some street meets, and this person was just curious, can you tell us more about what those are and how you executed them in your city?
Yeah, certainly. And I think it's a little bit of what Martin said was necessary in order to get the project to the pop-ups to where they were able to do this. And what Talicia was talking about, building trust over a long period of time. So basically, that's the message that we have, saying that we need to do that for our neighborhoods themselves. I had mentioned on Tuesday that our neighborhoods in New York City have a big trust issue with the traditional power structures. And a lot of those power structures are also the organizations that are best able to serve the community, but on their end, they say it's like, well, we realize we need to, but we don't know how. So we've been kind of playing like the John the Baptist role, is like preparing the way, right? So what we've been doing, we started off with guerrilla gardens, by the way. I didn't mention that, but we started with just one little plot, and we said we're just going to go plant a garden there. Let's see who shows up. And we had 2 people show up and a media person, and then we went on and did other gardens, and that was a way to really reach the neighborhoods, because gardens, for whatever reason, people gravitate to. They like them, especially neighborhood people. So that got us that exposure that we needed when we first got started. And then what we said was that, you know what, we can't just develop a program and then say, go to the foundation and say, oh, we want to do this in this particular neighborhood, and it's going to raise X by Y, and it's going to bring in X number of whatevers. It's like, to us, it doesn't work that way. That the product itself is trust. Which we kind of knew going in is kind of unfundable. So how do you fund trust building? So that's why we came up with the idea of the street meets. So a lot of people are familiar with block parties. And a lot of times that's what funders would say, oh, a lot of people have block parties, or a lot of people pick up trash, or a lot of people do X. And our point was, well, that's not what these are. What the street meets were, we picked one intersection in one neighborhood, and over a period of a month, we did 4 what we called street meets, and they kind of looked like little block parties. We didn't close anything off, but so we had our tents there, our signs, we had children's activities, we had ready-made projects like picking up litter or doing a mural. Um, uh, and it was interesting to see the trust building happen in real time, because we wouldn't just plop up and say, hey, here we are. We would precede it by a couple of weeks of door knocking and passing out flyers. And when you first go out into a neighborhood that doesn't know you, you don't get very many doors that open. So you end up leaving the flyer, or if they do open the door, they're apprehensive to talk to you. And even if they're outside, they just don't want to talk to you. They don't know who you are. They figure you're just like everybody else who comes into the neighborhood, that they want something from them. They want you to sign a petition or fill out a survey or buy something. But then as time goes on, the first street meet that we would do, we would have face painting, by the way, because that's always a big draw for kids. And we figured, draw the kids in, we'll get the parents in, offer water, offer some snacks. We're not big on free, but that kind of stuff is a draw, so we do that. So that's what we would do. And the first time we would go out, we'd maybe have like 8, 9 people show up. Second week that we were there, to show that, hey, we're not just a one-time organization, we would double or triple that number. And then as we did the third and the fourth one, we would have even more. And then we would take it on to another block. Last year when we did it, it was only a half a block down, but it just reached a lot more people and different people. And in that one, we had that one particular guy, that older gentleman. I don't know his whole story, but he just would not even shake our hands. I mean, we were out there, we would not shake our hands. I said, no, don't know you, don't trust you. It's like, okay. He came to the first street meet on that block, though, and he was there for a little bit, left, came back, left. Second street meet, he was there the entire time. He actually fell asleep on the chair. And then the third street meet, he actually got a tattoo of a rainbow, like a face painting on his face. So it's like, it just showed you, like, if you take the time to get to know people, they will open up. And the way that we see it, it's through those stories, how you learn about people's lived experience in the neighborhoods, that really will tell you what it is that neighborhoods need and neighborhoods want. And then once you've done that, then you can go back and say, it's not that this would be a good program for here, it's because this is a priority for a lot of the people in this neighborhood, and therefore it makes sense to do X. Still, probably won't have the same measures that that funders are necessarily looking for, but at least starts from a foundation of trust. So that's what the street meets were. And incidentally, Martin, where these are morphing in, what these are morphing into is something that we're calling the epic markets, which is going to be something like what you're doing. First taking the time to build up that trust, but then create this marketplace where you can go in and get your products and services. I think one of the differences probably in the layout of was it Batavia? Is that what it was? And York is there's a central business district, but the neighborhoods are zoned so that you can't have businesses in them. Okay, which means that you're precluding a lot of people from being able to build up wealth. So when we're creating markets, it's not just it's not more, it's more than creating opportunity for more businesses, but it's actually creating an opportunity for people that can't create businesses where they are. So it has that whole incubation thing. It has the whole let's start an economics platform in this community so that you can start having money flow through, as opposed to not going to the central business district. Actually, our neighborhood people are going outside of our city to Walmart and things to fund, because most of the businesses that are in the downtown don't cater to neighborhoods. They're like, you know, like $20-30 a plate restaurants, or that neighborhood people aren't going to go to. We're going. So I'd love to talk to you a little more, Martin, about the specifics of that. We want to offer Wi-Fi. We want to offer the whole incubation thing. We're starting something called Epic Wealth Builders, which is for youth to learn about wealth and earn income along the way. So we hope to be incubating them through that as well. Hopefully have like a sit-down cafe type of thing. And then once the market closes, because it's not going to be a permanent location, we want that to turn into a neighborhood entertainment venue for the night. So then you have your urban music, your Latino music, etc. So we're really trying to activate the neighborhood so that they can do for themselves.
Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love hearing about how all of you are doing such creative and, you know, affordable and really meeting people where they're at and addressing like what does the community need based on that starting place, rather than here's an idea that came, you know, from the state government and let's like throw it down there, but let's actually listen to people. So a question I wanted to turn to anyone or all of you. This person asks, how has COVID-19 changed the outlook on the necessity of financial resilience in your communities? It seems to me like this is a great opportunity for the state and for cities to take their financials and their financial planning more seriously. Does anyone have a response to that about how your community is looking at financial resilience during this time?
I can talk for a second. So I think the one thing that I noticed, and I think this is a lesson for our neighborhoods here at least, was that big entities like our local community foundation and our economic alliance and our Main Street program aren't as slow to act as we believe them to be. That when you do have an emergency, they do rise to the occasion. I think that COVID exemplified that in our area, which was really good. I mean, I don't, it's not a criticism. But I think the opportunity is for them to realize that, hey, if you were able to think of poverty and the plight of our neighborhoods in the same vein as being an emergency like COVID, we would be able to have solutions for that too. It's just as much as of a health emergency, the effects of chronic poverty as COVID-19. So I think that the opportunity, I think that if we can continue to prod funders and policymakers to understand that poverty is not just a lack of money, and that they have more to do than just the slow actions that we're used to, that we really can solve some of these things.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to jump in on that question?
I'll let you.
I'll start first. Well, for the state of Arkansas, I would say our response was, we had to wait on the federal government, and the states did their parts. And with PPP, for example, payroll protection, a lot of our small businesses took advantage of that. And one of I would say one of the best things with regard to PPP was having the ability to go to your community banks first. That right there, again, from a financial resiliency standpoint, really challenged those owners to really stress test their relationships with their banks, to stress test their relationship with their property owners if they were leasing their spaces. So sometimes we take for granted that we have that relationship, but we're not doing our part to maintain or nurture those said relationships. So I'll use as an example one particular property owner who went to their local community bank, and their community bank did not know what she was talking about with regard to the PPP. And she may not have known the proper verbiage or terminology to use to explain what she was looking for. And so I challenged her and I said, so do you have the relationship that you anticipated or you think you had with that bank? And she was just so stressed out that she could not respond properly to get her needs met. So we walked through that and I said, here's a perfect opportunity for you to go into the bank, let them know what's going on and see if this is a banking relationship that you want to continue. So I went to other community banks that we have relationships with that were the community was saying, this bank has been on it, this bank has been on it, and kind of coached that individual and then challenged her and said, you as the operator of this business may need to have make some tough decisions after this because what you wanted, what you desired was not the outcome that you received. So again, I think this is an opportunity for those people that think they have financial fortitude to really check and say, but do I? Individuals that did not practice great or exceptional bookkeeping skills and did not know where their inventory levels were, if they had too much inventory. All of those things and I have to speak to Main Street, Arkansas yet again, having webinars and having all these tools that are available for people to say, you know what, I need a refresher on this. And after, COVID in different areas, we're in all different stages. Now they can circle back around and say, I need help with this. And those resources exist now. Just like Sal said, once you have an issue out there, and if you're responding to the fire and you're responding in an effective fashion, what other fires have have been lit, but you're not addressing them because they're not ablaze? And so there's so many opportunities for us to take advantage and respond with such diligence as a lot of our communities have in our community here in Fort Smith with that type of response and support. So that's what I would say.
Thank you.
I just want to kind of add on the discussion for this one is it's almost like we've believed that the status quo for the last 50, 60 years is actually the norm. But as all you've got to do is read any of the articles that Strongtown puts out, and Strongtown has been kind of the canary in the coal mine for years on these issues. Originally, it was kind of framed in transportation ideas, and now I think we've learned that it's much more than that. The economic crisis from 2008 The Great Recession should have been our wake-up call, but it wasn't. We got scared, and there were some quick fixes, and everybody went back to kind of the 1950s mentality of, well, that's over. We can go back about our lives. That was kind of interesting, but didn't really mean anything. And all of the structural flaws that we have had with the way we've been doing things remained hidden and remained kind of out of sight, out of mind. Now it's highlighted. And it's highlighted because we are all going through a shared experience for the first time. The economic downturn in 2008 hit some people harder, but other people it didn't hit so hard. Now everybody is logged into their homes. That's it. They have no connection anymore. Before the meeting, Talicia, you had said something about what it was like, the looks, the stares. That was absolutely brilliant, because I think it's that first time that the rest of America started walking through grocery stores and felt, why is that person watching me? Who's going to yell at me for doing something? Are they going to yell at me because I'm here? That it was starting to feel the uncomfortableness of just what is supposed to be. This is supposed to be a free country. Well, it is. And we're all sharing the same kind of problems. And it's bringing this sense of what I think is not despair, but I think an opportunity to start having some empathy for people, to start feeling that connection back to what really makes America America is our communities, our neighborhoods, getting to know your neighbors again. Putting this away for a little bit and just going back out, all of the suggestions and the ideas that people are working on are about talking with your neighbors, doing things, living your history, learning. Those are the things that are making a rebound. And I think that's the greatest thing to kind of come out of this. And as a result of that, those ideas of how we're going to fix things, we have an opportunity to fix them and not just put a Band-Aid over those things that weren't working. We can structurally change and fix. Our opportunity is now.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, Martin. Empathy is such an important word. And what I've pointed out in a lot of Facebook posts is that, and like you were saying, it's an opportunity. Like, number one, we can't go back to the way that it was, because the way that it was, that wasn't working for a lot of people. But in terms of the opportunity for empathy, it's just like, so going down those same grocery aisles where you're seeing a lot of things aren't there, right? And also everybody having problems with transportation because bus systems not working. What else? Not being able to find proper daycare because the daycares aren't open, and you have to work, and then you have to take care of your kids, and running out of things and not being able to just go out and get it because stores are closed. And those are things that are part of some people's everyday life experience. So I think the opportunity is exactly that, a chance to actually think empathetically about the fact that other people's lives aren't as easy as yours or as ours, and then also saying maybe it's not it's not for fault of their trying, but maybe we can be more empathetic and really think about that way in order to come up with some more solutions.
Yeah, thank you for that framing and for your responses, all of you. We have some more questions, but I want to pause and just remind people who are watching that you can also submit questions in the Q&A if you'd like as we're going here, and we'll try to get to them. So the next question that was submitted ahead of time, this question says, with all the societal flux that's happening right now, how do you think that COVID and also racial justice advocacy that's happening right now, how are those two huge forces going to potentially change your downtown? This person specifically asked about like stores and restaurants in your downtown, but maybe more broadly, how do you think these issues are going to affect what your downtown looks like in the future, or immediate future, or later down the road?
Well, I'll jump right in on this one. And Martin, your comment about discomfort is one that I have been just saying at the top of my lungs is be okay with the discomfort that you are experiencing right now. And as Sal said, there's someone that's been experiencing said discomfort for a while, but those shared experiences right now have brought us together because of COVID. And we need to maximize this opportunity as communities, states, and as a nation of expressing that, again, Martin's point of empathy for humankind, period. And that's that. So how has this challenged businesses? And I'll speak specifically to downtown businesses. There are people out there that are saying, you know what, I've dealt with my discomfort, I've disclosed it, I've masked it. Now, because there's this movement that is occurring at so many different levels, from spending habits to I need your organization to make a statement to are you going to make a statement? And I know from business owners, they have to balance. Do I include all by making the statement and blacking out my page for Black Lives Matter? Or do I make a statement if someone challenges me and says, I've noticed that your organization, your company has not made a statement in regard to supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. What is your stance? Do you delete that post? Do you comment on that post? And who's watching that? And that level of discomfort, I think people on both sides don't want to make the wrong move. This is unventured territory for some. And some of those implicit biases that we have, that we kind of think are there, but they're so subconscious, we really don't know if they're there. And this may bubble that to the top. Individuals, again, have to get to know the people that are coming into their stores and then realize the demographics in their particular area. And is there a certain group that I'm excluding, not intentionally, but is there a group that I'm excluding without even realizing I'm excluding them? Do you have Black-owned business owners or Black-owned property owners in your area? If you don't, do your businesses have items to support Hispanic, Latino customers? Do they support a lower wage earner? Do they support anyone of color, the Asian market, because we have a large Asian population here in Fort Smith? Do they support this group, that group? You have to look at your inventory, and is it as diversified as I'd like it to be, or as I want it to be? Because you can like certain things, but oh, that's not my clientele. My clientele is middle-class white women that are educated. There's not going to be a middle-class Black woman that wants this book in my store. You don't know, because maybe you haven't made that offering. So this is all colliding at a great time for our communities if we respond. And a lot of people are being challenged, and it's making them feel uncomfortable, but be okay with that discomfort, because that's when change can come and it can be sustainable.
Yeah, beautifully said.
Some of the items that Talicia brought up are just what my notes on this issue were. And I was thinking when I'm framing this, that some of the hindrances to kind of what people fear is their fear of being wrong. And they're also fearful of that they've been played, that the ideas that they've been taught kind of maybe were a lie or weren't entirely true. And as we're seeing, a lot of the hindrances to moving forward, either out of COVID or the social justice issues, are about this, well, I'm an individual. Rugged individualism is what has been the excuse that's been used as a hindrance. But I would challenge, what's that interpretation of individualism? Do you live in a generic subdivision called Valley View in any number of states? Do you have an Applebee's on the corner that you can find here? Same look is not individuality. You can then be an individual that looks the same, feels the same in any community, and you can feel safe. But then you don't have what truly makes you an individual is by learning other cultures, learning other viewpoints, learning other experiences that make the opportunities available for, in our town, a woman from Argentina opened up an Argentinian bocaditos empanadas restaurant. And that is booming because people are like, I've never tried this kind of food. And wow, this is amazing. And you have different food palettes because there's nothing more that people want to commune over than food. And that's just a basic, you need food to survive. So one of the other restaurants in town, while COVID was going on, they stopped their regular service out of necessity. What can we do? They can't have as many workers in there, et cetera. So they built a same menu for a week. And they then became creative. They threw in a week of French food, a week of South African food and Moroccan food. And this is normally a bar that would serve pub burgers, et cetera. Very good, mind you. But when they had a South African dish or a Moroccan stew, I'm ordering that going, wow. And I'm going to make my kids try it too. Now, it might have been a little too sophisticated for their taste with curry, but at least give them the opportunity to have that experience in learning something new, that now you get a taste and flavor for. There's more that's out there than a grilled cheese sandwich.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, Sal, do you have a response on that question? How do you see the current situation, current issues that are so important having an impact? I know you've already talked a lot about this, but yeah, how do you see that impact now and in the future
Yeah,
in your...
I think, I mean, because the way that I talk and the things that I talk about are not any different now than they were before. But what I found before was that you kind of almost had to manufacture a crisis for people to realize that something was a crisis. Whereas I think this kind of took some of that work away, in that I think a lot of people that previously, and this is like neighborhood people and other business people, that previously would not have been talking about race, talking about economics on their Facebook posts, etc., now are. So it makes it easier, I think, for people to hear what you're saying. So hopefully that's something that continues. And I think it was Martin that talked about like the 2008, and you say, okay, we're back to normal, everything's cool. I think we've got to keep on having this be at the forefront. Kind of like what the Occupy movement did back in 2008, I guess it was, but I think with the wrong approach, where it became more about like, oh, we're occupying this space instead of like, okay, so what is it that we're actually trying to do? You're part of the 99%, the 99% too, right? And this is how we could do better. So it's got to be sustained, and I think that kind of changes what we need to do. Is like, now that a lot more people understand the argument and understand what the crises were, to then aid in making sure that changes do happen and making people accountable for the so far promises that some people make. Oh, we're going to do this differently, blah blah blah. So I think that's going to be a difference. One of the things that we did just roll out as part of the EPIC platform is the collective of neighborhood originals. I don't know if you guys have read any of Adam Grant, but he talks about originals. But the idea of this group is kind of to be in between neighborhoods and power structures, and coming up with a common language to that empowers neighborhoods, but at the same time acts as a translator of neighborhood needs and desires to the organizations that don't have that language and that expertise. So how do we bring about healing? How do we talk about healing from a neighborhood perspective? And how do we talk about healing and reconciliation with organizations that don't have that language? And how do you do it in such a way that it's not an accusatory thing and it's not a guilt thing? It's about how do we really not just move forward and say, oh, we're just going to move forward and like nothing ever happened. I think Al Green, and I might have said that the other day at Floyd's funeral, talked about the fact that every single time we think something ends and then we go on to the next thing, but you never reconcile. Like the country has never reconciled, say, for slavery, for Reconstruction, for all those things. So we got to do more than just move on. It's not about throwing a grant and saying, oh, hey, now you can do this community project. But it is really reconciling, like you reconcile a checkbook, saying these are the things that happened. These are the things that were wrong. We have to acknowledge it. And I've told the foundation, the big foundation here in New York, that, and this was before all of this, and I said, you know what, nothing's going to happen. No one's going to trust you until there is an acknowledgement from you, from other organizations, that they in part perpetuated a lot of the things that we see happening right now. So so just to come back and tie it up with a bow, I think these two situations make it easier to talk about that kind of language. But we also have to have something in place, and that's our collective, that will make sure that these conversations happen even after all of the other stuff kind of dies out of the media.
Can I just, one of the points that he said of, just being done with it and going on, I think that kind of goes to kind of hand in hand with what we've been dealing with for 30, 40 years with the advent of, television. Everything gets resolved in a half an hour or an hour. It's all tied up in a bow. And there's that expectation of, what do you mean we didn't solve? They're able to solve a war or world hunger or everything on TV within that time frame, and it sets unrealistic expectations for complex issues. But going back to what we've been talking about with the panelists is, it just feels different this time. It feels like people are really going to talk this time. And I had talked with one of my other friends that I think what I really wanted to talk to was how these two incidents really gelled together. The reason for that is we had already been in our residences for 90 days. And what were we in our houses for? We were in our houses for because we were afraid of a respiratory, not being able to breathe virus that was going on. Then we watched on TV someone for 8.5 minutes lose that breath, that which we've been afraid of having to actually avoid. It was right in front of us, and there was no escape. There was no being able to walk away from it and tie it up in a bow and then be, well, that was happy, clap, 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 and we're done. Now the hard work begins, and I think it will succeed because everybody wants it to, in a way. Maybe in different viewpoints, but I don't get the feeling of we're gonna just ignore it and it'll go back to normal. I don't think anybody wants normal anymore.
And I want to add something to that really quickly for the sake of time, is I think that there are people out there in our communities that have acknowledged these injustices. And I think all the panelists are in agreement of that over several decades and centuries. And we must acknowledge that there was a history before COVID of social injustices that we did not acknowledge, or we acknowledged and we continued on with our day. the advent of COVID forced us as a nation to acknowledge this, because in 2014, that's just one, you had the same thing that happened to Eric Garner in New York. We didn't have COVID. That still occurred. And there's many that have occurred that are not filmed that still occurred, and we don't know about them. So I think it's important for us, and especially being a person of color, to acknowledge that I know of these injustices, other people do, of all colors and races. And it's just, we were all convened at the right time in our spaces with those reminders that this is actually going on. And now, because I am confined, I have to choose to do something, or I can choose to ignore because I can't say I did not see, because everybody has saw. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah, thank you. All powerful words. And yeah, I hope that this momentum can continue. Maybe on that note, just to close, what is one thing that's in your communities, in your work, that is making you hopeful right now about the future, about not going back to the status quo, but about moving forward with a community that really listens to what neighbors need? So maybe we could just do a quick in closing, like what's something that is really giving you hope these days? Sal, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I think, and this probably ties back to the last conversation. I think it's the power of people to change. I think some of the greatest things that I have seen on Facebook and other social media is people, mostly white people, let's put it that way, basically saying, oh, wow, I had never thought of myself as being privileged. But now in thinking of it, I realized that the privilege was always there. I didn't have to do X. I didn't have to do Y. I didn't have to fear X or Y. And the ability for a lot of people to go back and rethink of what their definition of certain things are. You're seeing the word oppression a lot more. I know that I saw a Facebook thread where somebody used the word, what was it, like a Holocaust, and was that the actual even the word, but never had thought of it that way in terms of like, other than the thing that we talk about, like usually with specific words, and that wasn't the actual one actually. But I just think, I think people have the power to change, and I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful about that.
Martin, can we go to you? What gives you hope about the future of your community?
Sure, and that I would think that goes to one of the questions that we didn't get to the other day, was how each of us in our own way are working with a downtown revitalization, et cetera. And I think that is what my answer for that goes for this one too. Because I think we all have retail corridors that used to be the economic engine for a community. Your long stretches of strip malls and big box stores, and I equated those to kind of like the hands. Those were the hands. They did heavy lifting. They brought in a lot of your tax dollars. They were the engines of what a community was, like a hand. But now they've become a little obsolete. They're a little more arthritic. They're kind of going away. But a downtown has been and always will be the true heart of a community. And if your heart dies, you're dead. You can lose a hand, you can lose your retail corridors, but if you lose the entity that keeps your soul alive, and it goes with why economic resilience and the businesses, those in their essence, you can make money anywhere, on the outskirts, on the wherever. But what you're doing with a downtown. And why I'm more positive about this is because it's more community centric. Everybody is wanting to be together. Everyone is wanting to have shared experiences that are their own, but with other people also. And in order to learn from that and grow. And I think that's why I'm, like everybody else is, very optimistic that this is an opportunity that we would be foolish to just let us kind of escape us at this moment in time.
Yeah, thank you. Talicia, what for you is giving you hope in your work and in your town?
Real quick before I jump in, there was a question about, and I'm going to summarize here, low-income tax credits that came through. In the city of Fort Smith, I used to work for the Housing Authority and did LIHTC. So they actually do consulting. So to Mr. Dunn that's out there, if you do a search for Fort Smith Housing Authority and speak with their executive director, Mitch Minnick, he'd be more than happy to speak with you and let him know Talicia referred you.
Thanks for jumping in on that. I didn't know that folks on our panel had that kind of background knowledge, so I was going to respond to him separately. So appreciate that.
Yes, quite welcome, quite welcome. So my closing statement with that is what gave me hope, especially after Mr. Floyd's situation in Minnesota, was the number of individual voices that started popping up within our community that said, I want to have a vigil. I don't know what to do. I didn't know what to do, but I talked to my mom and I just wanted to light candles for this man. So we had that a couple of days after the situation had occurred on our riverfront. Our mayor of the city of Fort Smith, who is a Black man, was there, our first Black mayor of our community. Our chief of police was present during this vigil. And pastors, you name it. And it was just a great opportunity to see a community come together over something so unfortunate for another community. After that, you had another peaceful protest by another individual that no one really knew in the community. So you had all of these individual voices just popping up to the point we ended up having 8+ peaceful demonstrations that occur within our city with social distancing, with masks, all of that. That's what gives me hope, because in a community that is not immune to drug addiction, foster care situations, and just life in general, loss of jobs from an economic standpoint, to see people feel as though I have a voice. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm going to make an attempt and express that. That right there was a changing point for me, that people want to be engaged. They want to do their part, and they're trying. So you see that effort, you're like, yes, let's get more people. Let's get more people. And that's something that has given me hope, not only downtown, but within our community as a whole, because people are rising up.
Thank you so much, all of you, for spending time, for sharing your insights and your knowledge and your wisdom, and for just engaging in this wide conversation. So I appreciate all of you. It's been great to talk with you. Thanks to everyone who's attended, and yeah, thank you. Have a great rest of your day. Keep doing your good work.